Dan Lutz. Welcome to the latest broadcast of Dan plus Tank Live. That's DANK Live. It's okay. We're on the 19th of May, 2019. Sunday for me, Saturday for a lot of people on the other side of the planet. So yesterday we covered the hammer. Now we started with Serial Brain 2 and going over that. But we also had covered David Jant's website, Operation Freedom, where he actually was talking about how he had brought out a general that exposed that the Hammer surveillance system, spying system, was put into place by the top agencies and is being used for spying on every American. This was announced to the public. The very next day, the Russian collusion delusion started. This was because they needed to cover up spying with accusing the other side of spying, which is their number one tactic. Project onto the other what they're doing. Oh, be the first to accuse. Be the first to one. Oh, Russian collusion when they're doing Russian collusion. Because when you go back, it traces right back to Uranium One. It goes through Hillary emails that were whitewashed or actually bleach pit, as I guess. It's a software program that destroys the emails. There's systems of actually going in and where you use a hammer and destroy the hard drives, and so all this was done to protect that Hillary from ultimately being discovered as to what was there. Except nothing's ever truly deleted in this world anymore. If it's in email, it's not, there's no way to get rid of it. Doesn't matter how secretive you are, or whatever, it's always there. So that's just one piece. So ultimately, we're talking about Russian collusion between Hillary selling uranium to the Russians. Basically, our stockpile was reduced, right? And Russia bought it up. So who's friends with Vladimir Putin? It's Hillary. Now, not to say that Trump doesn't have a relationship with all the leaders of the world, including Putin, but his relationship looks like it's more about on the side of America. Trump would not be selling out our uranium stockpiles to a adversary. So this Hammer program was used to spy on Trump. But not just Trump, everybody. I mean, everybody. It wasn't just, a group of adversaries. No, everybody, every email, every text message, every Facebook post, every single thing that you've done was recorded, categorized, and then organized into a way that they could use it as a weapon. Whenever they had an opponent, they had the ability to go in and look at what they were doing. And if there was anything that could be construed or manipulated, they would then be able to use that as blackmail. Their whole system, the cabal system of blackmail, is the number one way that they've stayed in power. Do you ever think, all these years that you've been looking at how the government's going in the wrong direction, things are getting worse, why don't they do something about it? And you hear good conversation coming from someone about how if they're elected, they will be in that position. But as soon as they get into the politics, they get as absorbed by the cabal. They lead them down the path to the dark side. And in the society that rewards you being, on the dark side, that's what has been festering and growing like a cancer. The projection coming through the TV, through the talking heads, is everything's fine, and this is what you need to focus on. Over here, look over here. Don't look over there, look over here. In unison, all of them saying the same talking points. But the hammer is being used as the number one way in which that was going to be their next control system. Yes, they had control of the government, that they didn't have control over the minds of the people, the hearts of the people. Well, they've been breaking the hearts of people, right, by putting them in misery, giving them the feeling of hopelessness. But their minds were still able to react. So they were using tools to control the minds. So, for an example, Facebook. And many of the former executives had already left Facebook because they figured out that when you give a like, you're getting dopamine hit. Hey, if I see someone has liked given my thumbs up, I feel good about that, right? That's just natural. But it's also addictive. It can keep you engaged in using these devices, right? So you're constantly using these devices so that they can get you in sync with the direction they want you to go. And if you're thinking outside of that, well, then they can penalize you. They can ban you. So you're not getting as many likes. So no dopamine hit. Well, you have to change what you're doing so that you get this. So you get your dopamine hit. All of this is about control. How do they control the masses? How do they get people to move the way they want? So censorship is going to be very much part of this, right? Now, we take this as a right, and they're construing it into a way that says, well, it's a company, right? And they have the right to do what they want. Well, there's rules. See, if you're a publisher controlling the content of what you're putting out there, you're publishing what content you want. That's a different rule than an open forum, right? If you present yourself as an open forum for everyone to put out their views, you can't come back later and say, well, now we don't like those views. You have to be quiet, or we penalize you, or we ban you. Because if you're under publishing rules, there's taxes involved, different levels of control over that. So they were trying to skirt what they are presented as, so that they maintain their status, and the control system was allowing them to do it. So we need to really look and analyze, do the deep dive into the information, and figure out what's been going on. We have to be able to see if what they're doing is for our good or not. And then if we don't like it, we have to have our voices heard, and we have to stand up. 4 out of 100 people have to stand up. That's the number we came up with yesterday. We were really talking about this came out of Thomas Williams' broadcast, and he said Tank said it was 3.5. I haven't finished listening to Thomas. I got another hour in today. Bits and pieces, right? And bits and pieces, we'll be going back into the Hammer project document we were reading yesterday. We'll continue with that. So, but we have to stand up. 4 out of 100 people. So this is number one. We have to be organized. We have to know what we're doing. We have to be focused. And we need to get others involved, and we need to get people to take action. And some of the issues we have to deal with is that we're all poisoned by fluoride in the water, GMO in the foods, nanites, and who knows what else in the chemtrails to poison the air. We're poisoned, and so we're depressed. We're suppressed. We're being kept down because of this. But we have to wake up to know that that's it. So we have to come up with our strength. We have to be focused and move forward. What's another reason why I've been working on the Where We Go, When We Go All.love website is to try and give that some focus as to where are the fronts and where do you want to participate and fit into those sections. I'm going to be working with a few individuals that are showing a propensity for providing information and trying to focus them into the different categories in Where We Go All, Where We Go, When We Go All.love website in the forum section. So that's one of those things that we're going to have a place where we can organize from. Being able to do videos about your particular topic, whatever that is. It could be the same topic as what I and Tank are doing. We have to basically expand. So, for example, Tank, has started a broadcast that is going over the projects, right, and talking about those. So he's doing that, and then he comes and he speaks on the project that we're talking about, or on this is a project in other words, and speaks on here on DANK Live. But we've now expanded, right? And so Thomas Williams started with this topic, right, in broadcasting. Now we've ramped it up, right, with DANK Live and with Speak Out with Tank. So we need you to do the same. We need you to focus on what you want to focus on in this front and know that we're all heading in the same direction. So, think about what your favorite topic is about this, right? And go out and do a simple broadcast. It doesn't matter you have no one viewing it, right? Just look at it as practice. Eventually, you'll be surprised. You get a couple people looking at you, and then it becomes a few more and becomes a few more. And 6 months later, maybe you have 1,000 people that are, subscribed to you. Maybe it happens in 2 weeks. I'm knocking on 13,000 subscribers. Okay, good. That's great. We have a lot of people that are watching what we're doing. We need to expand this. We need to push out, not just into the people that are standing in the way in the cabal structure of finance or banking or Wall Street or government or military. We need those people to wake up to what's been going on and stop with the death agenda. Stop with wanting to kill off the planet. Well, not the planet, but the people on the planet for the sake of saving the planet, which is complete garbage. The planet has been through quite a lot with and without us, and it's still here. We're not going to do anything that's going to change that. So we need to focus on moving forward and changing things along those lines. So recognizing where we're at is the first step. Recognizing what you can do is another step. So let's move forward. Now let's go back to where we were yesterday. So we talked about the hammer. We'll wrap this right back over. And on projectspeak.net, there is a section under essential documents that talks about the Project Hammer. So let me go ahead and share that screen with you that we were dealing with yesterday. So we were on page 6. Let me go ahead and I'm going to share now my screen. So this is an 18-page document, and we were reading through. We got to page 6 in the Q&A. We're just going to scroll down to there. 6. I think this is it. Yeah. So let's see. So we're now. I'll just a slight recap. Okay, this has been talking about the situation of how the money is made in the financial system and trading programs, and how that money has been used. And I think they call it Task Force 157. I think is what they called it here. And that was basically a way of creating a way of spying using technology. TF 157. That's the system, right? So anyway, this was the beginnings of it. So he laid the groundwork, and we started talking about how these trading programs make their money, how it's hidden from the rest of the world, and how there's 2 sets of books. And there's a lot of depth in that is outside the view of most people, and they have no concept of how this works. All right, so let's continue. We'll start with the second question here. I think that's where I kind of was right, and I just did that one when we left off. So here we go. Question: were these accounts for the benefit of the people who had engaged in some kind of trading program? Answer: they were to get in a trading program. I haven't found anybody that didn't go into wanting to increase their income, and their greed is the highest bracket if they could possibly put up the money. Question: what I'm understanding from you is that whatever these individuals, corporate entities, or even government, they believed apparently by putting these funds with Citibank as part of this effort, they would then receive later down the road a payoff. That is correct. Answer: that is correct. So question: as a result of Citibank's management of these funds, is that fair to say? Answer: yes, basically the whole trading block in a nutshell. During during this course of deposition, General Koch was asked if he knew who created the hammer to begin with. He admitted he didn't know and was even reluctant to make a guess, but added that whoever set it in motion had to have been somebody at a pretty high level. He then made an interesting observation that whoever it was who had authorized the original structure, that it had obviously got out of proportion as time went by. The implication was that some of the money, the fallout, got diverted from the original intention. More than a few of those involved in Project Hammer at various levels have told me that they believe some of the pool of money created by the Hammer Project was diverted and used to rescue many of the world's major banks, who by the very end of the 1980s faced insolvency following reckless lending policies throughout the late 70s and early mid 80s. it's certainly true that at that time that major banks like Citibank, HSBC, Chase, uh, uh, Bank of New York, and others stood teetering on the very brink of disaster. Another view is that one. Uh, Another view is one that has expressed by Daniel Hughes of Hughes Oil Company, a Florida-based corporation. Hughes had many heavily involved in finding collateral to place in a number of trading programs over the years. This has cost him tens of thousands of dollars since most of these were illegitimate rather than genuine. It is a fate that waits for the untold thousands of unsuspecting investors who step into a shadowy realm unprepared. Even so, it seems that Hughes did play a part in attempting to place collateral in Project Hammer. He believes that the funding diverted from Project Hammer ended up in a CIA-controlled Swiss bank account in the name of the late Howard Hughes. Based on years of investigation, Hughes believed that Project Hammer involved in the trading of 13.6 trillion in debentures, resulting in a fallout of 1.1 trillion, which was stashed in the Howard Hughes account in Credit Suisse. Whilst there is no hard collaboration in support of this claim, it remains an intriguing possibility. More so for his deposition, General Koch indicated that black money generated by trading programs might be hidden in dormant accounts, and Howard Hughes' account set up 30 years ago would clearly fall into that category. Accordingly to Erie Koch plus, others have been spoken with. Project Hammer began life as an authorized but secretive trading program aimed at repatriating dollar assets that dated back to several decades. Koch confirmed this when he was asked. What are the overall objectives of Project Hammer were? Well, answer. Well, it was mainly to bring monies back to the United States from all types of activities, both legitimate and illegitimate. Not that they were all in smuggling business per se, but were in the arms business. They were all retracing dollars of one description or another that had accumulated all through the 40s, 50s, really. And that probably is broad definition as I can give you. And all kinds of nationalities were involved. All kinds of people were involved. Koch was then asked, who would have been behind a Hammer project? The questioner have asked have involved? Question: various agencies in the U.S. government? Answer: yes, obviously CIA and FBI, national security agencies of all types, Pentagon, and the broadest sense of it, and such, and the Treasury, Federal Reserve. Nobody got out of the act. Everybody wanted to get in the act. But there were numerous other entities involved in Project Hammer. No more so than the world's biggest bank, as made clear by the following exchange. Question: what other banks and financial institutions were involved in it? Answer: well, if they were still as a a correspondent to Citibank. A correspondent, in the sense General Koch uses this term, means one bank's account maintained by another bank. This is used to handle money transfers between both banks, and very often denotes a special relationship between the banks concerned. The questioner asks, question: do you know which of the world, which would have been involved? Was Chase Manhattan one? Answer: I am sure that every big bank, every major country at some stage of the game had some of this pass by them. they had a chance to refuse, or they had a chance to take it up. Okay, next section. So Citibank are the cheese. Citibank are the cheese. Okay. Koch was then asked who the dominant participant was in terms of running this project as this vast project. The general is in no doubt about his reply when he says that, based upon his own investigation, it was Citibank of New York, in both their Athens, Greece office and in the New York office. He also acknowledged that the hammer was part of an ongoing long-term kind of project. So Koch went on to reveal that Citibank were going to be the trustees. They were going to be running the program. They were going to be distributing agency. They were the cheese. I guess the big cheese would come to mind. They're the big cheese. All right. Asked to identify which principal officer in Citibank handled Project Hammer, Koch responded that from all records, communications, and contracts, John Reed was vice president, but he was the lone coordinator, for a better word. Reed was, who was Citibank's president and chairman during this period, was formally denied his involvement in Project Hammer. In a deposition sworn in December 2000, Reed stated that that he has no recollection or knowledge of anything purportedly known as Project Hammer, nor did he have any recollection of knowledge of any persons named Ari Koch. His deposition goes on to list a number of other items, people, and allegations that he had no recollection or knowledge about. For their part, Citibank, in a letter dated December 12, 2000, state that they never issued commercial instruments on the basis of possession of quantities of gold made available to it by agencies of the U.S. government and Federal Reserve in order to ensure the solvency of Citibank in the 80s and other bullion banks. This denial, although empathic, is interesting. Research shows the gold reserves reserved by the forerunner to the CIA, the Office of Strategic Services, OSS, was deposited in Citibank and other major banks too. Not in the name of OSS or CIA, but in the name of one of their operatives, Servino Garcia Santa Romania. On his death in 1974, some, but not all, of Romania's assets appear to have been illegally acquired by former Philippines President Ferdinand Marcos, who was at one time Santa Romania's attorney. According to Santa Romania widow, her husband gave Marcos a limited power of attorney for this for use solely in the Philippines, since he traveled abroad regularly. Marcos somehow seemed to have made use of this to gain control over Santa Romania's gold and other assets. It also appears likely, based upon documents in this writer's possession, that considerable quantities of gold once held by Santa Romania were later placed under the control of former CIA covert operator Major General Edward Langsdale. These assets were, however, lodged with Union Bank of Switzerland. Again, it is worthy to note that they were placed in Ed Landale's name, not in the name of the U.S. government agency. These assets are very clearly off the books. Large quantities of gold held by Citibank remained in the account of names of Servano Garcia Santa Romania and Jose Antonio Diaz de la Paz, later being well known, AKO Santa Romania. Under code references, under reference codes, Fanners Kingfisher and Burgest Harbor King, respectively. These have been the subject of legal wrangling between Santa Romania heirs and Citibank's John Reed. The fact that the gold held by Citibank and others may not have been in the name of the Central Intelligence Agency or the Federal Reserve, but rather in Santa Romania's name, but may have been all Citibank needed to wriggle out of the poorly crafted question. Okay. The Illuminati angle. All right. Yeah, so there we go. The gold connection remains unclear. However, there is a reason to support that the dollar assets that dated back to the 1940s and 50s, as earlier discussed by General Iriko, may relate in part to vast quantities of gold located during World War II by the Japanese plunder teams known as the Golden Lily, and also known by the Nazis in Europe, that substantial amounts of gold bullion were restacked, and then hidden throughout the Philippines prior to the war's end is now undeniable. This, however, was black gold, meaning that it did not appear on official status in the Treasury Department's list. Santa Romania was one of the OSS officers operating in the Philippines during the war and learned where the Japanese had buried plundered gold and other valuables. But there are other aspects of Santa Romania that are only now coming to surface. They reveal a shocking secret that, if true, could stake the foundations of our belief and change the way in which we view the world we live in. Because according to Santa Romania's widow, Luz, her husband told her that he was a member of the Illuminati, a very secretive elite group that dates back to the 1776, when it was founded by Adam Weishaupt at the University of Ingolstadt, Germany. According to those who have researched it, the purpose of the Illuminati was to set in motion a secret new world order of world revolution. This, however, does not fully tally with what Santa Rosa's told his wife about them. According to Luz, the purpose of Illuminati was based on the knowledge that the royal families of Europe were aware that they were losing political and effective control of their nations. But it was the possible loss of control over the wealth of their kingdoms that bothered them the most. Consequently, they founded the Illuminati and set in motion long-term plans aimed at secretly taking control of the world's finances, especially gold and other precious metals. In time, the royal families who sat at the center of the Illuminati movement were forced to expand and take into membership political and business leadership. At some point in the early 20th century, two 50-year plans were set in motion aimed at cornering the world's precious metal reserves. The foregoing is the account given to Luz, her husband, Santa Romania. How true it is remains to be seen, and it's hard to know. It's hard to view as disinformation told by Santa Romania to his wife to conceal his real motives, whatever it may have been. More intriguing still is Luz's account that her late husband was one of time head of the Trilateral Commission, an elite group that is known to have had tentacles deeply embedded in the Marcos gold story for years. Again, there is no collaboration evidence and the fact that the Trilateral Commission was founded only in 1973, whereas Santa Romania died in 1974, suggests this is unlikely. However, it is more than a little curious that whilst the great bulk of gold that eventually and undoubtedly came to be controlled by Santa Romania resulted from the plunder during World War II, he did have substantial gold deposits dating back further than that. Papers related to the estate of Santa Romania purported to show gold account that the Union Bank of Switzerland contained 8,000 metric tons that was valued at $10 billion. This account dated back to the 1920s. Such a quantity of gold dating from that period represents a massive holding, far surpassing that held today by the world's leading central banks. It is also that that it's also least interesting that, again, according to his wife, Santa Romania was a young boy adopted by his great uncle in Hawaii, who was married to the last Hawaiian princess. The couple that remained childless throughout their marriage, leading to the decision to adopt young Santa Romania. According to Lutz, this was a royal connection that gave Santa Romania entree into the Illuminati, said wants to have been dominated by the royal families. During the course of my ongoing investigation into Project Hammer, a number of others involving this program have spoken with, having told me quite an independently the Santa Romanian story that the Hammer program and numerous other collateral trading programs associated with it have enormous, powerful gold trusts of royal origin behind them. Perhaps the Hammer program was generated enough money to buy successfully quantities of black gold stashed in the Philippines to ensure that it is kept out of circulation, thus protecting the gold price to some degree. Perhaps it had more to do with the secret acquisition of vast amounts of black gold in line with what Santa Romania told his wife. Perhaps the assets in question were not gold, but included pre-war U.S. Treasury obligations, bonds, and notes that were coming to light in the Philippines, but which are said by U.S. authorities to be fraudulent. Whatever the case, it is certain that substantial quantities of black gold were used to underpin, collateralize certain trading programs, and funds thus generated are embarked for those other secretive operations. The whole subject remained an ongoing investigation. The deeper I dig, the murkier it becomes. Stories of warehouses full of banknotes waiting to be laundered by trading programs so that they can re-enter the financial system as clean as whistle with are commonplace. Foreign exchange transactions involving billions of dollars of equivalent currency and which trade at huge discounts. Unknown to official marketplace, there are also not uncommon. It is also the fact that many of those involved in trading programs are members of government agencies and security organizations. Next section, executive outcomes, Sandline and the Stasi. Okay. Another individual who played a considerable role in Project Hammer in South Africa, Rolf van Rooyen, who operated a number of business entities, including one called Ocean Tech and another called East Tech International Bank. At one time, Van Rowen worked for South African intelligence and also believed to have been CIA at the time Project Hammer was in process. Our significance is the fact that General Koch and Van Rowen knew each other, although Koch says he only spoke to him on the phone but never shook his hands with him. During a police interview in Germany in 1995, Van Rowen, when questioned about Project Hammer, responded, "If you're referring to Operation Hammer, it is extremely large, very delicate operation in cooperation with authorities of various countries in which Ocean Tech is involved." Van Rowen then proceeded to identify American, England, Germany, France, Italy as being involved. He also told German police that from the very first day he began investigating Project Hammer, that when realized that it was direct state matter and that the U.S., the CIA, and several other groups and secret service were involved, as well as very, very high coupled people in the American government. The later are rumored to include George H.W. Bush, James Baker III, former Treasury Secretary Lloyd Bentsen, and Federal Reserve Chairman Alan Greenspan. During this deposition, Erie Koch was asked if he considered Van Rowen's foregoing statement to be accurate. Koch replied saying, "He's not too far off. I'm sure he favored it up a little bit, yes." Working alongside Van Rowen was South African intelligence operative Ryan Stander. Both Stander and Van Rowen were board members of the East Corp syndicate, which boasted among 24 other companies in its stable, including were Interco Party Limited, Cavo Shipping, which conducted intelligence gathering missions for governments, and Bridge SA. The latter registered in Monrovia, Liberia. According to Peter, well, let me see where we're at here. What pages? Oh, no pages on here. My eyes are getting blurry again. So probably a good idea to stop here on page 12. So okay, we do 6 pages, and then my eyes will give up. So let's stop here and let's talk about a little bit of this. So we're really getting into some of the background of what was called the collateral accounts, that it was originally set up by the royals, and that the Illuminati was originally formed by the royals. Now, as I've said before, in the history of banking, from an Asian perspective, the plan was outlined called the Plan of the Experts. This, if you just go back, thousands of years ago, up into the fairly present time, everything was a monarchy. I mean, we had, what happened in Greece with the setup of a senate and a voice of people, a different form of government, but there was still royalty there. Go to Rome, there's still royalty. The emperors, that even though that they tried to move out into another form of how do you structure the world and move out of the monarchies, because they were always labeled by a king, and that king was either good or bad, and more often than not greed got to them and they became bad, right? So the people that they were using to control their kingdom with, those people wanted some say in how things happen. So that's the movement. So the royalty knew that they needed to come up with a way to distance themselves and create where, because they own everything. Right? They own everything. But they needed to distance themselves from the public view that they're the responsible party, so the pitchforks don't come out and chase them. So they recognized this hundreds of years ago. And so the plan of the experts was, number one, they needed to organize the world so that, number one, they would stop fighting amongst themselves. Whatever they had, they didn't want to go to war to maintain it, because a war basically destroys both sides. Then both sides have to rebuild. Usually the side that loses ends up having to, one second. So usually one side, usually a loser, the losing side ends up, being cannibalized to support the other side. They take the spoils of war, right? And now the winning side takes those spoils of war. So they needed to stop this, as they realized that they're fighting amongst each other, the back and forth, a lot of deaths, a lot of tragedy. So plan of the experts: marry each other together, all the royals, into one family, and then control the world. And this was where we got the idea of the League of Nations and the United Nations. And this literally was their plan. This didn't come out of something else. This was the royals putting this together. They needed to hide themselves. If we look at the Payseers, which QAnon has pointed out that they are behind the Rothschilds. They are behind all the other bloodline families. When you look at the bloodlines, there's 13 of them, but there's the 12 that everybody knows. And the one that was hidden was the Merovingian bloodline. Now, we also have the bloodline of Christ in that mix, right? Because we go the Da Vinci Code and Mary Magdalene and the bloodline of Christ. And that's what they married into. Now, I don't know what the truth is there. That we can go many different topics, and we can take that many different ways. We could say that that it was the bloodline of Christ, and they just married into that bloodline. But there's other topics when we're talking about bloodlines going back to the Anunnaki. Where is there an overlap there? I don't know. Is there an overlap? Not an overlap, or is it just a one story covering another? I don't know. Because everything is always hidden, always makes us guess at what's going on. Because if everything is clear, then we don't know who's behind the curtain to go after. But let's say in our in the information coming out of QAnon is that there is a process there where the Payseers oversaw everything from behind those other bloodline families. And that goes back to French monarchies. And that Payseer line, in order to obfuscate their fortunes, is what they would do is they would have the females that were born hold asset. But the males would run the companies. And the name followed the males, right? It's the last name of a marriage, follows the males. But the money followed the females. So you lost track of the names of who was the original Merovingian line. So they obscured it through these levels. So it was all about hiding who's actually in control of things. Now, this part in here where they start talking about Marcos taking the control of the gold, there's a completely other story on the Filipino side of this. I don't know which side is correct. Doesn't really matter. I do believe that Marcos had significant amounts of gold. It's supposed to be 640,000 metric tons is what was brought back to the Philippines that was lent to the Vatican. The Vatican returned the gold And Marcos's share of it was, as a lawyer, lawyers take their third. That was made Marcos the richest man on the planet. And he used that personal fortune to set up his family, and that's why his family has assets and gold and things of that nature. There's a lot of stories behind that. Let's not go there. But let's just say that a lot of gold was put up. Now, this is asset. And Project Hammer is talking about trading programs. So let's talk a little bit about the trading programs. So I've been associated with people trying to do the trading programs, and I'm calling them that just as a name. They don't call them trading programs. They don't call them trading platforms. We're using the name because this will make it convenient for us to track the story. So these, another name is PPP. So this trading platform was the way in which, under this system of the World Bank, IMF, BIS, United Nations, was to bring wealth to the planet. It is the mechanism in which money was brought into the world. The currency was brought in. So this is a mechanism. It's a tool. I understand that Project Hammer here is a kind of a second level, which I really didn't understand that. This provided me information. The other is the IMF, BIS, World Bank, where they take a humanitarian project, they give it a number. World Bank does this. Once it has a number, the IMF then says, okay, the World Bank approved the project. No money in the World Bank. The IMF is now going to say, we're going to now fund this, and it's going to now work with the banks through the Federal Reserve, where the traders are going to trade the projects, because they have more than one project. But this one project that comes in, let's call it the dam project, right? So they're going to build a dam, and it's going to cost, let's just say $1 billion. Right? So how do they fund this? Well, they have to have asset to turn this on. So there's always an asset brought along. So the country that has the project of for $1 billion, they have to have a dam. If they had the $1 billion, why would they need to go to the World Bank and IMF and get money, right? Why would they do that? They don't have $1 billion. So what do they have? They have some asset. So here's some land. They register it with the trust. They in turn get cash. How does the cash come into their hand? By the trading. So they have an account and they have a project. What's going to fund this is the transaction. So they put up the asset. Maybe it was gold. Let's say they had, $10 million in gold. They're going to get $1 billion to build a project. Now, they put up the 10 million, and suddenly that they're using it as an asset base. As they said, now the value of this project is $10 million because there's an asset associated with it. Well, what do? Is they trade the project until the amount of the project value goes up, because I increased the value and I sold my piece, one piece to you and one piece to you. I marked it up. It was a 10 million when I bought it as a trader. I traded it. And I'm going to sell a piece of it and I'm going to mark it up 10%, 10%. Maybe I'll mark it up 100%. I double, I get 20 million. Oh, I'm going to mark it up 3 times. I get 30 million. I mark it up 10 times. I get 100 million. And I trade that, and I trade that, and I trade that. And then sometimes I buy back the piece of that project that I sold to one of the others. Well, actually, that piece actually went to that trader, and that trader sold to that. And I bought it back from that trader, but now it's already up at 50 million. I bought it back anyway. By buying it in this spiraling system, it increases the amount. So now the money is going where? Into the project account. But it sits there. Well, I'm not going to go into more detail down that way. But let's just say that now the money is made available. The project can now proceed. There's $1 billion now going out to pay for workers, to pay for the land, to pay for the supplies, to build a dam, which now all of that $1 billion in activity goes into that area. And all of a sudden, the people that receive the money for their salaries is out spending that money. That goes to the people that bought food from, or paid for this bill, or paid for those things. And that money just starts circulating and circulating, and it creates economic activity. It creates a flow of money. It has a currency. It flows. So there's how that money would flow into the system. That's how it was designed. Now, according to what we're talking about here, is Project Hammer was conducted by Citibank, not by the other banks. Now, keep in mind that the Citibank is one of the originally big banks, just like Chase, originally big bank. And they are acting as though that they are in parallel to the other system. Now, they were part of the trading programs, I'm certain. But why don't they start their own? Why? Because they want to make money. And do they have? And it's outside of the game of the United Nations. My guess. I don't know if this is. I'm just guessing it. So why do they have a separate one? In other words, that's what I'm saying. So now it's more on a private side trading program. Maybe that makes more sense as opposed to the public or the private. Anyway, it is set as a separate set of books. This doesn't appear when you talk about banks and what do they have on ledger for their accounts and how many deposits they have. That's retail public side. Nothing to do with the private side. They could be flush on the private side and operating at a negative on the retail side. Separate books, separate sides, separate businesses, all under one bank. So that is, I think, where we're really looking at when we start talking about this system, right? And this goal that they put into place is we're looking at that in every way they game the system. They find an angle and they try to make it angle. And my cat is talking to me. So she's pregnant. My cat here. She's half Siamese and half local Filipino brand striped, and she looks just like her mother striped. But she's I think looking for, where does she want to go and have her kids. I don't think she's quite ready, but I think she starts scoping out things. Anyway, she's always been very talkative. So this gold has been an asset that was brought into play, right? And what do? They ledgered it as collateral for these other banks. They leverage it for doing these other projects. The question is it registered to the trust? According to what we know is that everything, including this, was registered to be traded so they can get currency, paper. So who owns it? Now, everyone who doesn't understand the process of registering, what does that actually mean, would say, yeah, I'll register my gold. Is it ignorance? Is it stupidity? Is it a fraud? Is it a scam? Is it really just taking advantage because people are not don't understand the system that was put into place because it's all been hidden, all in the legalese and finalese? For me, it's against the social contract with the world, right? They're talking about social justice out there in the world, right? Well, we need to talk about the social contract. DANK yesterday was talking about these levels of government, right? You had the draconian law, then you had the monarchy law, and then below that you have the statute law. So we're dealing all in the statute law, but we need to have for the people, this social environment that we find ourselves in. When we have a click box there, we either have to sit there for 2 days and hire an attorney to analyze all the stats that are put into the to the terms and conditions that we have to check mark bar and press proceed, that legalese that have been put in there. And the impression of what is given to us as our social contract, for example, what we're getting out of the social media is that this is like open platforms for us to express our viewpoints. That we can say whatever we want, as long as we're not going to be doing things that are so outside of what their community guidelines are. And then we talk about adult content. When you start getting into hate speech, what's in your mind or your feelings about someone else, that's then subjective to their view and might not be yours. And that's where we have a problem. So our social contract that they've presented with us is an open platform. I think that no matter what is in that legalese, it shouldn't matter because it's against the social contract. You want to talk about subjective? The people out there are thinking, that we need to have some say in how this comes about. If you're presenting us these massive contracts and we have no concept of how they are, because if we read them, the misuse of words and the revamping of words for us to be able to track that is not reasonable. The word person being redefined at some point to mean, anything other than a living man and woman. So they use person in there, and you're agreeing to this, and it's all about a person. It's all basically designed to keep us from being able to have a true strong place to act from. We can't stand on it. We're always being swished around because they keep moving the pieces and changing the names and repainting them and flipping them around, so that it's no one, even if you spent full time trying to figure it out, could do it. I know several people that went full time into the movements of sovereignty and how to stand on your own and change your status, and they spent decades, and they get an angle on how exactly it looks, right? Okay, this way it's kind of looking like it's coming clear, okay. And as soon as they start acting and it's working, they change the pieces around. The cabal changes the pieces around and they try to figure their way out to how to obfuscate what that was about, so it becomes blurry again. I think that's against the social contract with people on what a reasonable man. There's an aspect of contract law that you can add into as a term and condition. Is like what a reasonable man would think if they read this, what it meant. If you read this contract and what a reasonable man would think about it, I didn't say person. A reasonable man would think about this, would then say, okay, that's what the standard would be in court. If you took 10 people off the street and they read this and you expressed what they thought, who's right or wrong about the dispute, It's what the reasonable man would say it meant. It's what we're talking about here, and when I'm talking about a social contract, it's the reasonable man scenario. What would be reasonable when you come into a platform and you talk about this? What would be reasonable? So we have to get to a point where we're able to do this. Now, Project Hammer, I guess, I've been relaying Project Hammer because of my impression of this. We still have, we're 2/3 through it, and it did mention some things about about spying, but we haven't got. It's been mostly about the financial piece, right, and not really related to the project that we've been talking about in regard to David Janda. David Janda, and what was put out by Serial Brain 2 and QAnon related to this spying system. But maybe we're going to get there. But if we want to just theorize about a couple of things, it would take a lot of money to build this system, and so money could flow in from the projects. This system, this alternative system, the Hammer system, might be the funding mechanism for all of these things. My understanding is that when the people were bringing forth funding to do their projects, they would come up with, I'll just say $10 million, and then they want to take it to the trading platform so that they could get a bunch of money, so they could go and do their thing. This would generate so much money that this would be so outside of the of what the wealth of normal people were. Is if people start talking about how this was done, it would ruin the game, right? Because everyone said, well, why do we have poverty if we can generate money this way? Isn't that right, Tank?
That is correct. That is correct.
So this system would basically result in everyone having the ability to do their projects. So that's why they've kept it a secret, right? And that's why people don't even understand that that's how the money is created in the system.
Yep.
So anyway, I went through another 6 pages, so I'm going to break this up into thirds. I can only read about 6 pages here, staring at the screen before my eyes get blurry.
I get it, man. I get it.
Yeah.
It's that stuff is deep, though. It's really very insightful as far as what's happening and what's been happening and how we've been manipulated, and everything has been planned out. I spent a lot of time talking. Yeah, go ahead.
I said, apparently, what I was just saying, kind of a recap and looking at my observation is that this Project Hammer of this is a trading platform, way of generating money, but it was not the same trading platform that was put together for the United Nations, Bank of International Settlements, Federal Reserve. This is a private one run by the cabal for their own funds, it seems to me.
Oh, for the Hammer project you're talking about?
Yeah, I think that it was not part of part. I mean,
it's
that's my
trust.
impression.
It's the trust. It's Manna. It's the unknown country. Everything on the Hammer project is about Manna. Before Manna was Manna, it's the back ledger system where they took all the money.
Well, okay, I hear what you're saying there, but what I'm saying that there was another system that was put into place by the royals. That was the United Nations. That was the whole system, how they would fund things around the world through these projects. And they would when a country had a project, such as a dam, they'd put up their smaller amount of asset so that they could multiply that in the system to get the money to build the dam, right? So this is on the, you might say, the public side. I said my impression in reading this Hammer project is that it was a private side done by Citibank, right, by a separate group. Now, I would not saying that it's not part of the trust, or it was that they weren't registering trust. I'm saying that they are registering to trust, but it seemed like it was like a second one. I might be wrong, but
No. Well, it's there's several of these, right? All of them go back to the same basic core thing, and all of those go back to the trust, and
right.
all of them gather their planned trades and buy sells, micro trades, and algorithms. All of that is these guys are just not smart enough to figure that out, like the ones that we know, so all of that is decided by the quantum system, right? It just swaps out an algorithm and boom, and they go through a micro trade, and next thing you know, money is made, right? But it's all just different reflections or expressions of the asset redemption program. And that's really what they knew, right? Like, oh, they steal an asset, they put this in, they get more control, they get more control. And in their minds, it was a perpetual system of them just hedonistic, uh, indulgence and constant control, right? Unlimited, potential to do whatever they wanted without any concern or consequences, any kind of karmic consequences. And that was the case until 2014, when the peace treaty was reenacted. I believe it was 2014. That they operated without any fear of consequences. There was nothing for them to worry about. So, they just indulged constantly on everything, and it was just that's why they got so dark. Like, because it's just entertainment,
Right.
practically. But in reality, while they were just indulging, with nonstop debauchery, the ones who were actually in control at the highest level, they were looking at it like, we're taking these assets to live, right? Like, we need what this planet has. So we're, and that's what they do. They would take over, like, just like a cancer, right? They would just take ownership of it, like according to the galactic laws or whatever. And, and then they would own it. And my understanding is, this is kind of what Leanne talked about with the veterans the other day. Like how Kim had told her, like, they can't hurt you because you're everything that you had done as a as a soldier was with honor and integrity to protect people. Even if they used you for something else, right? As soldiers, and she said, but what they'll do is they'll try to break your heart because you're dangerous to them.
Yeah.
And I realized that this week, and I've really put a lot of energy into my vets this week, and just trying to expand that network and get them to realize how incredibly valuable they are, right? Because I really believe it's the veterans that open this up even more, right, and keep people safe. Because there's lots of guys out there that are, I've talked to a lot of vets, right, who are loyal to the Chinese elders, and they were, we had offered them money. We had, we had their access to their back ledger stuff. Millions of dollars, and they would turn down millions of dollars of real money to hold out for the promised fortune of revalued currency.
Right.
So we want those guys on our side, right? We want those guys working for us. We don't want those guys working for our opposition, because obviously, they have access, authority, and reputation, right? Like, people know who they are, and they also know, they've worked for those guys. So, it's important that they're with us and not with our opposition.
Right. I'm all for that. Hey, I was waiting for you to get on. I want to kind of just say my little news that I gave to you earlier from the little birdies that were singing. That I heard from someone, and then someone else that Steve Mnuchin would be gone by next week.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah. So so I had some confirmation of it. So we'll see what happens. Of course, this is just people talking, but it is the word that's coming from some it's well placed sources. So we'll see if that's going to come about. I think that would be a very positive thing. Do you have anything to add to that?
I can tell you that I checked in with Kim this morning to find out if the restructuring was finished. And keeping in mind, Kim will keep things vague like that because I don't know if that means something in the system, if that means restructuring of personnel. I every impression I get is she's not waiting for any more promises or cooperation from them. And I started to say this the other night, but I never quite got it out. But Kim and I were talking about the kids, like I said, and even she said, these guys have made so many uh, backsteps on everything. They never honor their agreements. They're terrible. They have repeatedly, over and over and over again, tried to kill her. Uh, they have they don't operate by any laws. They think they're bound by draconian laws, which in their mind makes them gods. I mean, they really think that. So, and then people keep empowering them by treating them like they're gods, by like Steve Mnuchin is guilty of treason repeatedly. He's throwing a temper tantrum in as the Secretary of the Treasury, and saying, like he's the boss, which is just silly nonsense. I mean, like you would think if you're the boss, couldn't you do something? And obviously he's not. He doesn't have the ability to do anything. So, because they really want the RV, right? They've been trying to do it diligently. So I have to actually give them credit. They've really been trying. Unfortunately, it's not a good thing. So, so when I was talking to Kim, she was, obviously frustrated by that, and she was kind of like, we were both talking about the kids, and it's like, she keeps in mind the children and the innocent people. That is right. She said because it was up to these guys. She's like, I would have cashed it in and said, we're not worth saving. Because it's true. If you were going to judge him, and that's been part of the problem with these different galactic councils, is they're looking at their behavior, right, as like the cream of the crop of the humans, because that's how it was portrayed to them, I guess, by the draconians. I mean, that's my interpretation, by the way. Kim didn't say that part, but you got to think if these are the leaders. I mean, are you kidding me? I have never seen anything more laughable in my life. There is not one politician I have ever seen who could lead me anywhere. They don't think intelligently enough. They don't have good enough ideas. They don't move efficiently enough. They're not decisive, and they don't stand for anything. No one like that can be a leader to me. I'm sorry. I can't follow them somewhere as they haphazardly wander about and sit down and have meetings and talk about what we're going to do for 6 hours. Then they move for 1 hour. I mean, they're useless. So that type of governing it's useless. Now, on the military side, they're trained to respond in strategic planning and things of that nature, right? So I do appreciate, a lot of the military guys, but all of us have to find that place where we exist and realize just that our power is in the our own liberated mind, thinking, our hearts being able to freely express itself, to love, to be at ease, to be complete in ourselves without making hard decisions based on money that should be available, which even the money is just energy that is ours. The energy is ours, right? So all of the energy that was given back to us as given back to not even us, but given back to the Rothschilds as paper. I mean, honestly, it's it's like every single scam you've ever heard of, right? Like it's the magic beans, and all the Rothschilds who think that they're like so brilliant, all of you sold your soul for magic beans. Like I'm sorry, like you're not grown enough to lead this planet, not for humanity. Um, you were a great slave to bad guys trying to destroy everything, and for that I commend them for being excellent at following orders and giving over any individual expression or thoughts or creativity so that they could, you know, participate in debauchery and hedonism and satanic rituals and horrible things.
One of the things that struck me, I told you that we of one gentleman that I'm work through is interfacing with someone in those higher bloodline families a bit, and he basically says that there's a value of savants, right? And looking back at the Anunnaki, right, and they literally have savants as a category of their structure, and when they want, and they use them as a tool, the savants.
Yes, I know some of the savants.
Right? And the the so these they have a tool. They're used as a tool. So I guess I'm pointing out is that the slave masters that were here, right? The head slaves were just another tool, like a savant,
Hmm.
right? And that's also why they're creating systems here to create more savants on the planet, right? They're messing around with genetics and chemicals that they're putting out there to cause things for people to end up to become, which we would call, some sort of mental disorder, but it's some form of being a savant may come out of that, right? A higher instance. So they're looking for the savant. So they're just, they're just taking us as a herd and saying, well, let's do this and see if we could create some more specific genetic types that we're looking for. So I was just a passing thought, but I don't. I think that this time of them using us as tools is now gone, and they don't know how themselves because they're not creative. They don't know how to make a new plan. They're just continuing with the old plan, and they don't have the savants that are in that category of plan makers to do anything other than follow down a particular line that they've already been going down. So they don't know how to stop. The slave masters don't know how to stop. It's the ones that are underneath them that hopefully have some spark of creativity and are willing to basically create a whole new reality where they're outside of the realm that they've been in, right? And because that realm is ending, and the first ones to jump are going to have the biggest position moving forward, or let me say a head start, in moving forward, and can also solve some of their karma, act quickly and be responsible to actually shift a lot of their karma.
Um, you know, may, I, maybe will. I'm not I kind of feel like indifferent about that. About like appealing to them and shifting their karma. It's like it's kind of like forgiving somebody who doesn't want to be forgiven. They don't think they've done anything wrong. They don't care. I mean, like remorse, regrets. Some kind of the reality setting in of like in sincere regret. Something that indicates that the part of them that's human is still there. And otherwise,
Maybe it's gone. Maybe it doesn't exist. Maybe that it was bred out of them by blood.
yeah. I mean, I kind of look at it like they just go on. I just kind of feel like I I believe that death is mercy to them. Um, and I think that otherwise somehow they'll just kind of be recycled back through another 26,000 years where they won't be in the same position. They'll just be, you know, they'll be subjected to all the things we were. That's what that's my understanding of where they're at.
Right. Yeah.
Because when they had the opportunity to speak up and do something, take action, just cooperate, just honor the agreements, the deals, they were given repeated opportunities. So by them not doing that, because those agreements would have essentially liberated them. Instead, their silence and their consent, the very tools they used against us, right? Their
Right.
consent is really their agreement to go through and be subject to the same thing.
Yeah, well, the who's the head of draconian law right now? Is it Kim?
I'm sorry, who's the head of the draconian
Law. Who's in charge now? I
Well,
mean,
there is no
in that
draconian law. I mean,
position.
there's no draconian law anymore,
So,
right?
so okay. Well, I'm just saying because if they're under draconian law, who's now the leader of the draconian law? Who gets because that's a monarchy
Oh,
system.
it would still be Kim. It would still be Kim
Yeah,
because
so
even before it was Marduk, right?
right,
So he was the monarch law or the or martial law, and he was also he was the one who enforced. There's three at the top, right? Who would be there? But Marduk was the head of them, and so he was the head of the draconian law, and all of them are gone.
right.
And they're not coming back. So there's only one there. So really,
I mean, so
I
if
think
it's still there, if that place, if there's still a place of that, and she's the one that hands out the law, there. You said the result of punishment in that law is death. You know,
yeah.
uh,
Well, I mean, that was a little bit I looked up on it, because I was trying to because anything that's draconian is always like dark and whatever, like Vlad the Impaler kind of stuff, right? Like where he'd pierce through the heads of his victims and put them on stakes around his castle. Like if you don't agree with the king, like you're dead, kind of stuff.
right.
And that's I suppose there was a time they did that just to impose fear on everyone because nobody would want that to happen, of course, right? Um, so I think that's kind of what part of what has been seen. It's they have there's I forget what it is, but there's this channel right from like the 90s or something like that, and one of the things that came up, and I forget the context. So anybody out there who I know Shilea knows it, but I can't remember the context. But it was basically like this agreement, right, where humanity was really a 13th dimensional, soul or whatever, and the Draconians were like 12th dimensional, and they were known warriors, right, and doing whatever. And in the agreement to come here, the Draconians viewed us as worthy opponents, right, and they said, "Show us no mercy, because we will show you none." Right, and that's really what it's been. They have not shown us any mercy.
So we shouldn't show them mercy then.
No, no, no. I don't agree with that. No, I do think we should show them mercy. No, no. But even in that, even with mercy, you don't show mercy if
Not
that's not what someone
weakness.
wants.
We're not talking about weakness, but
No,
mercy
no, no.
and strength.
I mean, it's like I said. I think, and I mean this sincerely. This is not a, backwards snarky thing to say. I really think that in this, like the way I see it, is death is mercy. You know, it's and at this point, there's no place for them on this planet with their current understanding, and there's no way to really undo it, right?
No.
And to continue to live on, if their conscience was activated, right? Like conscience means like cone is like with science and knowledge, so with knowledge. If they were actually, if that real knowledge of knowing what they had done was with them, right? The weight of their conscience would be an absolute, it'd be torture, right? But because it was programmed out of them when they were children for the most part, and they were
Right.
created psychopaths. In my opinion, it's like, well, I can appreciate and look at that and say, you know what, I can be merciful on that if suddenly they felt the pain of their conscience, right, and they were genuinely remorseful, but certainly not to stay here though. I mean, there's no place for it because it's like even if because they're professional actors, how could we possibly rebuild? And we have the same constant characters trying to take over the world because they keep pretending that they're remorseful, right?
Right.
It's like you just can't. It's like you got to go. So
You got to go. All right. Whether it's another planet or on an island, maybe Fiji has a separate island they could set aside.
no, I think you definitely shouldn't do that. That would be like Mad Max meets Gilligan. Terrible.
Oh, that's horrible. That's a bad one.
Yeah, horrible combination. It's like, oh, it's not even funny. It's not even funny, and it's not even, and it's tragic all at the same time. Oh, it's terrible.
Well, maybe we can use the island that China built in the Indian Ocean.
Yeah, maybe. So McKim did say that the restructuring part, which was 50% on like Tuesday or Wednesday, that was completed short of like one last piece. That's all that was left. So as far as I can tell, that's it. We should be testing Monday morning or today. I mean, I don't know that we're limited by banking laws anymore because the banking laws are all set up for the very reasons, like, so they had an exact plan and a time when they knew they could do their stuff, and then institutional transfers would travel on the weekend. But that's when they would do their trade platforms, because they could hold it over the weekend, do these trade platforms, and trade up and make all this money off us, right?
Right.
So now that that's not in play, it would seem that there's really no limits on time, or space. We should be able to transfer instantaneously at any time, any day, any hour, because it's instant.
I was working towards setting up a trading platform on crypto. This was about 6 months ago with another partner of mine. We were going to tie in TBC to that as well, and we actually had a trading desk at Chase, and starting funds and everything was there, an account and all this. Turns out the other guy we were working with had some let's just say not honorable intentions, so we basically walked out of there. But this particular one was not scheduled around a weeks or anything along those lines. It was literally ongoing, nonstop, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So it was just it was a flow, a completely different type of systems what we were looking at. So we were looking at the aspect of how things are when you talk about computers and analyzing how things can happen. We're not tied to a bank week. With a weekend in the middle, or a year for that matter. So anyway, we were whenever we start looking at things, we can rebuild a whole world based around the tools we have at hand, and we don't have to apply the same principles that they did or act in the same way they did, and we can act ongoing, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and whatever we do. I don't know in the new world if we'll end up with trading platforms if they're necessary. Maybe completely unneeded. But anyway, we can redesign, make things work for everybody. But I do think we need to do things openly in front of everyone, and so everyone can see how things are. Still maintain privacy for individuals, but it's a balance. But there's things that should be able to be achieved. People's personal business is personal. It's outside the government. They shouldn't have the ability to now use that against you, right? Because the government changes their mind about what they like or don't like. It's the system we're dealing with now. Well, anyway, I was covering a bunch of topics before you came on, kind of overlapping, and that kind of was tying into a little bit of what I was saying earlier. So, but I'm anxious to get rolling with making something new. I know we've got some people that are anxious to add their input, on how things go.
Well, I'm very excited right now to set up these campuses and really create space for these inventors and scientists and holistic practitioners and people that want to step away from the system that we've all been in, right? Because we get to create this safe space, which is exactly what I'm going to do. And I just recently realized, there's a lot of these plans that like I've just been kind of given over the past year, and you know, and I see how we do it, and I see how it'll work for us and work for everybody, and how we can expand, our energetic signature so that we are able to rejuvenate humanity and create our own communities. My original project is actually community revitalization. So part of that is just creating, amazing things and just not even worrying about what they're doing at all so much is, we have to avoid it, of course. We have to make sure we don't refuel the enemy and we take responsible decisions, but we don't put that burden on all of our project owners, right? It's something that, we can kind of head up from the back seat and kind of say, okay, we're gonna go here, we're gonna build this, we're gonna buy this, right? And put those people in place to go buy up, the factories and the land and things like that we can utilize to bring forth products that aren't adulterated by poison and toxins and cheap labor and slave labor and all those things that really just you know uh, contaminate everything in our world with this fear-based energy, right? And we can just conduct business properly. I mean, actually do it properly and set a standard that really has not been set in our lifetime. Because we actually commonly accept that if you are successful, quote unquote successful, right? You have a lot of money, that you had to do something awful probably at some point to get there, right? And you did it to cut the corners. And most people will accept that and be like, well, hey, you got to do what you got to do. Or are you willing to do what you got to do? These are all common concepts that we, are just programmed into us as being acceptable, right? Like it wouldn't be acceptable, but because you're rich, we let it go, right? And I mean, even people like Anna von Reitz, she's always talking about giving money back to the original trustees, and it's like, why? What did they do with it when they had the control of it? Any of them? What did any of them do for you? Nothing. They don't care about you, So
Well, if
and
we want to look at you know back go 16,000 years or however many millennium we have to go back, you know we're people here on the planet. We need to look at us as a whole, as from Earth, and then say what do we want? What do we want as a new world? What does that look like? Right? And ignore all of the trappings of this side versus that side, the divisions, and just focus on what we want, right? And really where we agree, and only focus on that. The stuff that we don't agree about, let's not bring that to the table, right? We have too much to do on what we agree about to worry about things that we disagree about.
yeah, yeah, I was watching it. We put so much energy. Social media, right, is such a tool of it's actually breeding apathy, right? Because if you're fired up and you're on social media, all you're doing is contributing to them harvesting fear, right?
Right.
And so what's the option? Most people, they just like, I don't even care. They don't want anything to do with it. Just, it's like, whatever Trump's doing, I don't know. In New York, it's very evident because most people don't follow politics, right? Most people don't even know what's going on or have a clue or even research anything. And I was reading a report today and it was talking about, this whole process about impeachment, right? And they didn't present one single fact, but all these Democrats kept getting up and saying, like, "Well, there's plenty of reason to impeach him. Should he be president? No." I'm like, how is it okay to talk about our president that way? How is that acceptable in any society that we allow, people to be that disrespectful and that just outright? That man won an election. Right now, either the election system is completely corrupt and you're bought into the cabal, or you're bought into the cabal and you're just lying because that's what you do, right? So no matter what, it's like for people to talk that way is just pure ignorance because there's more jobs, the economy's booming, everything they would measure greatness in any other president, he would be the greatest president of all time, you know. And so
Right.
to to me, it's just I've talked about this that Barack Obama, in my opinion and many's opinion, is the greatest speaker of all time. Now he was corrupt as hell, and evil and doing horrible things and costing Americans lives, making deals with Iran to give 400 million or 400 billion dollars to Iran in support for what? How did that happen?
Yeah, but but it was horrible without a teleprompter.
Well, I don't know. I don't know that that's true because I watched him answer questions all the time, so I don't agree. And even when
Okay.
he was terrible, Trump's ability to speak, like what, he's got a presence to him, but his actual ability, and I'm looking at this from a speaker standpoint. I've I am an award-winning speaker. I've spoken all over the country, and I value it, right? So I really analyze these things, and the way that he would speak, Barack Obama was incredible. And I got totally distracted by that because I didn't know any of this other stuff was going on. And I took everything he said at face value. And it wasn't until Trump came on the scene, you know. And I remember saying to people, look, if it's Barack Obama's on the head bad guy and Trump's the head good guy, I'm like, we're all screwed, is what I would say that because that's what it seemed like to me. Because honestly, and I know, and we do, and look, and I love Trump now. I mean, I love Trump now because I see what he's doing. But the presentation was so dynamic by Obama. But and people, you know what? And honestly, people show themselves how racist they are when they try to deny that. See, I'm comfortable with him being great and being a horrible human being or whatever he is, right? And that he was a terrible president and made he if you look like when even when dim-witted Bush there was president, right? Um, you really weren't even talking about racism. Obama is the one who he relaunched the civil rights movement. He made it seem like it was an issue, right? And brought out all this stuff about ISIS. And now you have Ilhan Omar, who is clearly she is terrorist trained, right? The thing she first of all she's beautiful. She really is a beautiful woman, and she's speaking. And when you watch her speak, she's speaking just like the angry jihadists in the mosques who are teaching the kids how to cut off an infidel's head, you know, with that same visceral hatred. But here's what I gotta give her credit for. She's not hiding that she hates America. She's not hiding that she hates, everybody. It's like the question is, how on earth are you in the U.S. government? How are you part of that, right?
Well, Nancy Pelosi explained that for AOC, right? It's such a Democrat area that a glass of water could be elected. It's probably the same for her.
Well, yeah, that's my point. It's obviously rigged, right? And then you know, and it is strange. Thomas talks about this from time to time about it is you're an anti-Semite. It is it's how it's considered, right? You're considered anti-Semitic if you say anything against Israel, including the facts that Israel occupied. I mean, and it wasn't it was really the Zionists, right? They just occupied that territory and they literally took over Palestinian land. I mean, that's what happened. That's what history will, that you can look that up, right? And the reason why we support it and justify it is because they're the chosen ones. Now, when you know that none of that is true, right? That's not true. The religions were created and fabricated, right? And there's a portal there, and that's why Jerusalem is such a holy land. And that every time you have one of these, I mean, every time I hear somebody's, firing missiles and bombs, it's like they didn't do that just out of the blue, unprovoked, for no reason at all. I'm sorry, they just didn't. Right? If something happened, there's always more to the story. And at very least, I think we have to at least question, why did that happen, right?
Well,
And
I think there's more to even that, I think that the conflict there is purposely orchestrated. Even the Palestinians, I mean, I'm not saying there weren't people there, in the beginning, but mostly it wasn't a populated area. But they were forced into that area by Lebanon, right? They ejected a lot of people and put them into there to cause the conflict, right? That they want, and I think that's pretty much orchestrated, to have a constant battle going on there. They needed to ratchet it up. So anyway, I don't know, ultimately who should be there in that land. I ultimately, don't know. I don't know if the Israelis should be in that in and not in Israel, but in Egypt. I don't know, because they ran from Egypt. So I'm just looking at these old conflicts as just again a place to create a problem. Um, how do we get out of this programming that this is the issue? We need to not again fight about these things and fight and look for clean water, clean air, clean food, and work on those and not on trying to create a state or make this a conflict. Just have everyone stop fighting. Is I don't know how we get there other than focusing on these other things.
It's crazy.
Yeah. Anyway, sorry, a little side because I know I'd looked at this way back when, and I was saying, well, I was probably in my 20s when I was looking at this and saying, these people came from Lebanon, So I this conflict of back and forth that looked like it was just orchestrated, to cause a problem. Now, I didn't understand at that time how the depths of the manipulation could be going up to an Anunnaki level of fighting over the land, going back into millennia, on whose land is that, right? And obviously, the deserts going from North Africa across the Middle East and Israel to Iraq to Iran, all of this area looks like it was hit by nuclear weapons, right? It's always desertized. How do we transform the entire area into green? Focus on that. For whatever Muammar Gaddafi was doing, in his past and terrorists, all that, he gave that all stuff all up, and he started, working towards bringing Africa together, and he wanted to make a new monetary system, and he was going to greenify the whole deserts of Libya, and he was building, these giant pipelines, 340-foot wide pipes that would carry clean water that was desalinized from the Mediterranean into the Iran, and he was, like almost complete. He was very close. He would have completed this, and they would have been filling up the inner desert with water, fresh water, and creating a green zone to feed all of Europe and Africa. So that'd be a project to get started. Probably there should be someone in Libya that needs to get this project restarted.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Well, yeah, the whole world has been on pause, right?
Yeah.
And it's just such a I was thinking about this with the governments. Part of the reason why they always have meetings to discuss things, and lawyers come in and they prolong this, right? One of the things they were talking about with they had this Eric Holder who refused the subpoena, and the fact that he was even like subpoenaed in the first place, the Democrats like protested, right? They walked out of Congress. And now they have the nerve and the hypocrisy to try to make it seem like it's a constitutional crisis when Trump, after allowing them to completely rip apart his family, go into all their stuff, that now because they're subpoenaing more information, but now it's them, right? Now it's different. Now they want to take a stand and say it's a constitutional crisis. Well, the constitutional crisis is when the very essence of what life is in this third dimensional world in a human being is completely ignored. And when a baby could be born alive, our most precious human beings on the planet, because those human beings, they are perfect. And look, I'm saying even when they're flawed, they are perfect. They are not, they are not they have no regrets from the past. They have no expectations for the future. They are unshaped beauty and power in those tiny little bodies, and they are completely defenseless. And the entire existence of the human race relies on human beings expressing philoprogenitiveness, which is the natural love for your offspring. Because if we did not love our offspring and we were just looking at survival, right, like we were out in the jungle or something, we wouldn't have a baby because the baby's not going to help us survive because they're just dead weight, right? You got to feed them, they're going to cry. You go up to like, take down a woolly mammoth and your baby starts crying. It's like they don't help you from that standpoint, right?
Right.
So you have to, and this is innate in the DNA of every human being on the planet, that you have philoprogenitiveness, the natural love for your offspring. And if you don't have that, you are not human. And the fact that they are all endorsing the murder of these babies when they're not from abortion, by the way, this is not an abortion issue. This is an attempted abortion, and the baby lives. The baby's alive, and they have 38 counts, right? And they're trying to make that now. They're trying to set the stage for the 2020 election, right? And so they're trying to portray, and they have control of the media. So think about it: if you have control of the mainstream media, and you're able to perpetuate all this, what you're doing is you're setting it up to try to create the illusion that the majority of the population would just assume kill those babies, right? But and then what they plan to do is try to rig the elections the way they have every time. And they're putting, like their chief pedophile in charge, whoever they can find who is the most creepy, gross human being on the planet, between what's his name there? The former vice president there, what's that guy's name? I don't know. I'm drawing a blank. But all these different characters, they're all consumed with this lifestyle, and they're doing all they can to protect it, right? So now they don't have a master planner, because their master planner, if he was around, he'd be like, guys, you can't do this, right? You can't do it this way. You got to do it this way. And he'd come up with another plan. But now you're seeing how flawed they are because their plans are so transparent. It's so obvious what they're doing. It's so obvious how small they are. You know, they Nancy Pelosi just came out and she was like, "Well, we never said there wasn't a crisis at the border." It's like, the hell you didn't, lady. You got up there right after the State of Union address and you mocked President Trump, saying it was a manufactured crisis. One of the other senators went down to the border himself. He goes, "The one thing I noticed is there was no crisis." They were repeatedly saying these things, and now they just lie. And if the public continues to consume it, it's on us, because we can't continue to allow them to repeatedly just say things that are just absolute bollocks. There is no truth, there is no substance, there's no value to anything they're saying or doing. These people should not be in charge of anything. But the
Right.
reality is, they're slave owners, and we're the slaves. And that is something that should actually inspire self-righteous indignation. And I don't care what the situation is, even in, however we declare, our sovereignty from a spiritual standpoint, a, multidimensional standpoint, just the essence of our being, until that is recognized and acknowledged here in this third dimensional world, we are still slave status. And that's why people like Steve Mnuchin are able to sit there after being fired twice, and we're still, and what are they going to do with us? They're RVing us right now, right? Oh, he's going to be let go this week. Well, maybe he will, maybe he won't. So far he hasn't been, because I've had the same reports from the Treasury, and he's still there somehow, able to throw a temper tantrum, and everybody gets scared. Like, what are these people afraid of? I just can't even fathom. they it's like, are you afraid that you're going to rock the boat, because the sky's the limit, because all these, silly, nonsensical ways of thinking that we've adapted and integrated into our fear-based system. The problem is fear, and the answer to fear is really, it's moving with power and integrity, and returning the authority to the caregivers of the planet, which are the humans. And that means, I know Kim just told me this. I know Kim just said the draconian law and the monarch law. You know what? The draconian law is out, because the draconians don't run this planet. Those contracts are dead. And as far as, statutory law that we're used to seeing, it's clearly flawed. It's just a different version of, the draconian law. It's just like the same way the Catholic Church is just a dumbed down version of satanic rituals, right? And every other church for that matter. Right? That's all it is. Anything that has rituals, that is all spells and sacrifices. They're breaking the body of Christ, and drinking the blood. I mean, that is the communion, right?
Yeah.
So all these things, we have got to have a place for humanity to exist on this earth, so we can restore the planet.
Isn't that right, Tui? Tui joined us.
Yes, indeed.
Yes, indeed.
How's things in Fiji, Tui?
Hey, Tank. Hey, Dan.
Hey, man, what's going on? You okay?
Yeah, the Fiji is everything is going good. We went on Friday to go and meet. Yes, can you hear me?
Yep,
Yes, we
you're
hear
good.
you. Go ahead. We're just letting you talk. There's a little delay.
I think it's a delay. Oh, okay. We just on Friday we tried to reach the Attorney General, and so we managed to reach him. Not reach him, reach his office. But the government were busy because of the the Secretary General of the United Nations that was here visiting Parliament. So we weren't able because we weren't able to see him because of that. So yeah, so on Friday he left Fiji to go to a different country here in the Pacific, the General Secretary for the United Nations, and we've managed to make an appointment to be able to meet the Attorney General this on Monday tomorrow. That's tomorrow from Fiji time, and yeah, we'll be looking forward to talking with him. There were there was a lot of people in the office and people in government. We went and visit the opposition. We call it the opposition in Fiji. So we have the government and we have the opposition in parliament. So we went and visited the opposition, and they were happy because they know that there's no money in government. The government is short. The budget has been short for maybe 1.5 or 1.4 billion. So I don't think the government will be able to bring that amount from anywhere, from any of the financial institutions. And yeah, they still it's just like anyone else. First time hearing about the trust, hearing about the Manna Holding Trust, and just getting to sit down and talk about it with them was a privilege. And they've asked me to email some more information
Well, it's well. At least you have an appointment. He ran away, so you couldn't catch him to another country. So it'll be delayed, but that's all right. It'll come in time. No,
Yeah.
and we have the delay, so it'll be all right. So so it's one step and then the next. So don't worry. We have these little events to go through. But cheer up, Tui. You don't sound your happy-go-lucky self. Uh, and Tui, you might want to jump off and jump back on if you want to have. We can clear the delay, maybe. Maybe that might work. And we'll see. So, well, there's a lot of things happening in the world. Um, or I did get some more feedback about Fiji as well. So actually, it'd be good. I talked to Tui after our call. So Tui can reach out to me, give me a call. We'll have a conversation. Um, and we'll see about those other things. I know our Russian friends have been emailing. I sent you, Tank. I sent you another email about this. Maybe you might want to respond to that.
Oh, I will. I will respond.
Yeah.
See what
So
they're to say.
couple things brewing. So anyway, but just about coordination, making sure that we're all start going in the right direction on these different fronts. Everything's going to hit all at once. As soon as the rocket fuel gets ignited.
Yeah, no. It's everything has been prepping, right, for so long that you can see how I appreciate that people have just been worn out, with promises of performance and things of that nature. And it's tough, I feel that, myself at times because it just when your expectations are high, back in September, the government committed to Manna that they were restructuring everything in the government, right? And you had all types of things happen that witnessed to that. And basically, Kim had told us that in 10 days it won't even matter because we'll be free. Now, if they would have just done what they were told, we would all be talking about what it was like to be 6 months, 8 months into the projects. How the world's already changed so much. We'd be talking about all the victories and how amazing it is, and how we didn't even know we could be so happy. But instead, we're still talking about pathetic human beings like Steve Mnuchin, and how they're holding up the entire process. Right? It's like they're holding back a tiger with like a chain made out of construction paper.
Right.
It doesn't make sense. And then when we started this broadcast 75 days ago, we were 14 days away from them releasing everything. Right? They said, "Well, look, if the RV doesn't go this time, we're going to go through." Now
We
that
had a
should give you an
countdown.
idea. Yeah, it should give everybody an idea of just what you're dealing with. You're dealing with an absolute belligerence, clearly incompetent, not leadership, right? And what happened is they are as effective as a chicken running around with their head cut off. It can't eat, it can't survive, but they just keep on moving. That is what they are.
Well, I hear if you just drop, some grain down the neck, the chicken will keep running around.
Yeah, that appears to be the case. Because they don't have any money. They've been draining their own system. They're chomping at the bit to try to devour the pennies that from our transfers, from every transfer, from every bit of savings we have. They're doing anything they can to take everything you have and just feed on the last pieces of humanity. So we got it figured out though. Everybody out there, this is what it is. They feed on fear and division. So what we give them is we just demonstrate our love for humanity, and we demonstrate that we are absolutely fearless. We are fearless and incorruptible, and we will not be compromised. And in that demonstration of love for humanity, for our children, for each other, for the possibility and potential of all that's beautiful in the world to be manifest in such a way that we can all appreciate it. When you love that, when you are connected to that energy, into really creating, symbolically the kingdom of heaven, so to speak, on the planet, really, allowing the world to become a place where we can trust to let our kids go outside again, right? And we just reject the various ways they're trying to threaten us and make us afraid. And if we just do that, and we just right now we come together instead of allowing them to divide us, because you know what, it all depends on who's telling the story, right? Now, if you were to tell the story about what's going on, with the issue of abortion in this country. Now, I have long held the stance that there's really no issue with abortion because there are cases where horrible things happen to people and they have 12 weeks, right? That's the way the law reads now. In 12 weeks, that they can make that decision to have an abortion. And I'll tell you something, I would not begrudge them a bit. If something horrible happened to my daughter, believe me, that would be the least. My conscience wouldn't be condemned a bit. I couldn't even be held responsible for my actions. I just couldn't be. So that would be the least of my concerns of that. Of course, you could have that done. The last thing I want you to do is have to raise a child of your rapist or something like that.
Right.
But keep in mind, you could be pro-choice because everybody is pro-choice, by the way, no matter what you think, because we all agree a woman and a man have the right to choose who they're going to be with.
Well,
So
not
we can
everyone believes a man has the choice.
Not everyone believes a man has a choice.
Yeah, a lot of women
But
say, "What?"
No. You missed what I was saying. Yeah, you get to choose who you're going to be with
Oh, I
intimately,
see.
right?
I see where you're going.
Because think about it. this is where this whole argument gets flawed. You had a choice. Matter of fact, I'm pro-choice and pro-life. You get to choose if you have unprotected sex. You get to choose who you're going to be with. Those are all choices. Why doesn't anyone ever talk about that? No one ever even brings that up because you had a choice. You had a choice, right? You had a choice whether or not to get drunk at the party and sleep with some guy, or you had a choice to, like before that happened. But we think, no, I can do whatever I want, and then I'm not responsible. But the reality is, if you choose to do that, then there's rewards and consequences, right? And depending on how you see them, you might think, oh, this is my consequence, and somebody else might see it as a reward. All right, so that's a choice. But even with that, I'll even go further and say, no, there's certain cases where I know Alabama struck this down, but the only reason why Alabama went so hard the other way is so that there was no room for misinterpretation.
Right.
And I agree, and I understand why they did that. And now they're trying to blame that. They're trying to blame that on Trump, right? Like, oh, look what's happening, and they're so appalled. Now a woman doesn't have a choice over. The woman has a choice. Now, but like I said, if she doesn't have a choice, in other words, something happens to her, and she didn't have a choice, I would never expect that woman to have a child. But I'll tell you what, if she carries at 40 weeks, she's having that baby. Or she should, anyways. And if that baby survives the brutality that is legalized in New York State, the shameful brutality, the shameful harvesting and murder of babies, if they are to survive, it is absolutely unconstitutional on the core of the Constitution. They are literally saying the Constitution doesn't even matter. We are not governed by it. That, by the way, that is seriously what they're saying, because they're mocking these things. The media is like, oh, these old protocols. They're mocking our laws, anything that is sacred, because the Constitution was supposed to liberate us, right? The Constitution is used by every government in the world. It's not just here. And the Constitution originates with the Articles of Confederation from the Iroquois Indian, and the Iroquois Indian were the Atlanteans. And that is what was supposed to be implemented. That should have always been the agreement. But instead, it turned into this debacle that we have now, where we're empowering, the harvesting of our children. Now, if nobody catches on, this is a fight for humanity. It's not a fight for Democrat or Republican or who gets voted. That's not even the case. And in this fight for humanity, President Trump is for humanity. He's fighting for the people.
Indeed.
Indeed. Can we come back on?
No, he was on for a moment, but he bumped off again. So it's probably bad connection problems right now.
Gotcha. Well, I'm watching things unfold everywhere. I think it's great news that Twitter shut down Alexandria Cortez's Twitter feed because they thought it was satire. I think that's the best, funniest thing I've ever heard.
Say that again. I didn't know this. What happened?
Twitter shut down Alexandria Cortez's Twitter page because they thought it was a joke. they thought it was satire. Which I'm like, so do we. We all think it's a joke.
Oh well, you see, this is why they shouldn't be involved at all with like taking people down. But you know what? I told you about personomy, the concepts there, right? So in this social networking that I was building, the idea would be that you would set your own preferences as to what you want to have presented to you. If someone was registering something as say adult content and you didn't want adult content, you just basically have that filter turned on, right? And it doesn't come to you. And if someone is offensive to you and you don't want to see what they have to say, like I would like censor like CNN. Right? I just like, okay, I'm just so done with CNN. Anything coming from CNN, just stop it from coming to me. Boom. But that's me deciding, not some algorithm out there deciding to prevent things from happening. You have to flip it around. They have it for tyranny. I want freedom. I want choice. I want there to be independence of thought. And if someone wants to present something that's a little edgy, I should decide whether I want to continue or not.
Man, yeah, I agree. You know, I got to share this. I really think this is profound. I interviewed my friend David Hayden the other day, and and David's had a really, some really exceptional, you know, um, success in life, right? And he always he really refused to compromise and do it the cabal way. And at one point he was worth like $500 million. He was on the cover of Forbes magazine in 1999, and he had a very winnable and reasonable case, and he was basically being sued for every penny he had, right? And he had a very reasonable case to say, he had mapped it all out with his lawyer. They should have won. There's no logical judge that would have let him, not win. But what the cabal does is, because in reality, the court system is not based on justice, right? And because now, we understand a little more that there's ruling bodies that are going to rule in favor, considering draconian law and monarch law, all these other laws, right? So there's like stages in the cabal. Like, you get to a certain stage of you're worth $10 million. Well, you know what? If you want to keep that $10 million, you're going to have to participate. You get to $20 million, you're going to have to participate in this ritual or that, some horrible thing, right? So that it's like, it's like fraternities, right? Fraternities will go through a horrible hazing process, and then they're a brotherhood for life, and they have to hook each other up because they all remember like some horrible thing they did together, right?
Right.
And that's the process. Now that's what the cabal does, right? It's a big fraternity of evil. So David refused to join this, fraternity of evil, and therefore they took every penny he had, every dime the man had. Right. Matter of fact, over the past 12 years, even had his childhood home seized, which had been paid off forever. Right. And they took his belongings, all because the man just refused to work for someone else. He'd always work for himself. Took all of his belongings and just smashed them, just threw them out in the garbage, and they were priceless. Some of the things he had, right? And he's like, can I just move it to it, do this or do that? And he had to sit there and watch movers just evacuate all his stuff, throw it on the ground. And through all that, right, he ends up having a. Now, he was hard. I mean, very harsh, like, to do business with, because he wanted it done his way, the right way, and he wasn't trying to play their game, right? So he had an edge about him, like a really sharp edge about him. Then the man has a stroke, right? Can't get up. He's out in the woods, falls down a ravine, and gets blistered by wasps or bees that make hives in the ground, right? And he lays there getting stung by bees for hours, until finally his dog, barks and gets somebody's attention, and they hella back him out of there, and got him to safety, right? Now that man came on the call, and you would think all the bitterness that you would have after an experience like that. And so we started talking about this thing and that thing, and he just described his experiences, right? And I was just highlighting some of those things and talking about it. And he goes, and he made sure to make a sharp point. He said, "I am not a victim." He goes, "This entire path," he said, "I chose." He goes, "So please make no mistake. I am grateful. I'm happy." "I am not anyone's victim." And I just thought the power of that, to be self-aware enough to be like, these experiences have been brutal, but I made my mind up. I will not compromise before I even got in this body, and he knows it. He's very conscious of it, and he is in a place where clearly diminished. I mean, he's always very well spoken. You can see him if you go to the Speak Project YouTube, you'll see David Hayden speaking at the TED Talks, about imagination, and he actually quotes my son Jordan. But anyways, but here he is now, and his speech even that day on the interview was a little bit off, a little bit slowed. But I'll tell you, you knew that man was like, he took full responsibility. I'm here. I chose this. This was the path I had to go on, and I have no regrets. And with that, still designing incredible things that he mentioned. He talked about the what he and I nicknamed the chakra net, right? But this incredible internet system that he designed that will literally identify with each individual's energetic signature and be unhackable, right? And he's built the whole thing. And he before he had the stroke, he was in full on, like, had it maybe he was like 8% away from finishing, is what he told me. And from there, he has a stroke. You'd think he'd forget all about it. He came back and he's still working on it. And I just thought, how many of us have the character to do that? Because he's in a horrible situation trying to survive right now, and yet and still, he's conscious of who he is. Now, to me, you want to know how to change the world? Take responsibility for everything you see happening. Realize that everything that is happening is a reflection of what we are allowing to happen, and own it.
The funny thing is, I've had this conversation with so many people who, and I tell them, you're 100% responsible for everything that's happened to you in your reality. And they just can't absorb that. No, they have a list of reasons and a list of offenders against them that are keeping them in that position. Right, and it's really beyond how to take those steps to understand. Is very elusive to them. That they're 100% responsible.
You know what? This is what I find. Here is one of the curses that was put on us. It's kind of like somebody who is struggling to quit smoking, right? Now, the thing is, usually the person who's quitting smoking, they don't want to quit smoking. They like it. What they want is they want to find a way that it's good for them, right? Somebody who, is like an obsessive eater. They don't want to stop eating. They just want to find a way to make overeating good for them, right? We want to find a way to make, 700 calorie chocolate brownies, make us healthy, right? Now, for the most part,
those are healthy. I really love
I know. I convince myself that, when I really want a snack, I just convince myself like, well, it is Thursday, so calories don't count on Thursday, But for the most part, the trap that we get ourselves in is we don't want to do the right thing or be the right thing. We just want a reason. We don't want to be happy. We're afraid to be genuinely happy. We're afraid to be exceptional. We're afraid to be dynamic. We're afraid to be ourselves, in the complete version of ourselves. And because we're so used to being afraid, we think that who we are is afraid. And so instead of being the best version of ourselves, instead of being happy, we come up with reasons and excuses and people to blame for why we're not happy. And for the most part, people will confuse familiarity, yeah, of our misery, because we're so used to feeling miserable. So that when we find someone to blame and we say it's not our fault because so and so did X, Y, and Z to me, and once we find that person to blame and we put it on them, we're still miserable, but we're comfortable that it's not our fault. And because it's not our fault, we feel relieved in some way, and that confuses us, thinking that we're happy, but we're not. Nobody's happy because they have somebody to blame that everything in the world went wrong. At the end of the day, all you can do is adjust your energy and make decisions every step you make, following the highest path of energy that you can. And by doing that, you won't blame anybody for anything, because you'll realize that your life is your own and the path you're on is the one you chose. And each time you go through something, what you should be asking yourself is, what should I be learning from this situation? Because clearly I have authorized it. I've allowed this to happen in my life. Now, how do I take this? What did I want to learn from this moment? What do I want to learn in this experience? And if we look for that, you'll be amazed at how quickly things can resolve, because you'll learn lessons so much faster and things will change. The whole world can change that same way. So I'm asking myself on a daily basis, all the time, what did I want to learn from being subject to people that have no vision, they have no authority, they have no creativity, they have no integrity?
What is it you wanted from them?
Yeah. So
yeah, what is it? I don't know. I don't know what I'd want from them.
Yeah. So, but I take responsibility for it, though. Now you can too, because it's not just me; it's everybody out there too, right? But you don't have to blame me.
100% responsibility for interfacing with you.
That's right. See, and you know what the beauty of that is that when everything falls into place, you still get to take 100% responsibility.
That's it. Yeah.
You get all the fame and all the blame for you. That's it.
I take 100% responsibility for taking the first steps towards the GCR.
Yep.
And I don't regret any of those steps. Anything along the way that I did, I do not regret any of it, because it just gave me a foundation of knowledge that I didn't have before. And it took me around the world, many countries. And when I found out that I was not on the right, path to acknowledge that it was wrong and that it was a lie, I take 100% responsibility. Like I said yesterday, I had a call from Rodriguez while I was here online with you at the Rodriguez Trust individuals here in the Philippines, and I called them back afterwards. Now, the representatives in the American side, they knew my position had changed, but not here, and so I had to express to them that the GCR was not going to happen the way that they've been envisioning it, and they were expressing, well, what about their thousands of projects that they've have all literally, ready to go. We're talking literally lots of paperwork of each individual project and contract that went with it, and so on. I said, all good projects can get funded.
Yep, absolutely. And
So,
that is the truth. If the project is going to be in the best interest of humanity, of the planet, and considerate of the individual human experience, meaning no one group has any power over another group to impose their way. So we're not going to be funding missionary trips so people can go in and occupy an area and force all the indigenous, whatever to be, Christians.
you mean ISIS may not apply?
Right. So we're not gonna fund the Muslim movement to take over the United States, right? Like that would not be in line with our project guidelines. We're also not gonna, they came out the other day. It's amazing. There's this this guy, who was a bodybuilder and claimed he was transgender, I guess, or I don't even know what these different things mean anymore. I'm not really sure, but I guess he was claiming to be a girl, and he was breaking he was breaking the bodybuilding, like records for women, right? And then they did a test on him, and they said, nope, he's a guy. And I thought, wait a minute, there's a test to figure out if someone's a guy. I mean, we don't just get to decide.
Yeah,
I mean,
remove their clothing.
it's like, what about the 42 other genders there? Are you sure he's not one of those? Because it could be. Um, and then Kamala Harris is like today we celebrate the day to fight against homophobia, transphobia, and biphobia. It's like, I don't know anybody who's biphobia. First of all, anybody, nobody is biphobia. As far as transphobia, I'm not afraid of transgender people or any of those things at all. I'm just not an advocate of the lifestyle. And as far as homophobia goes, if you were to look at the way that homosexual men act at almost any gay bar you've ever been to, the things that they do and the way that they talk and the way that their sexuality is promoted in everything they say, that would not be appropriate behavior for a woman or a man to do if they were heterosexual. So I would argue that their lifestyle is actually heterophobia, and they are critical and allowed to say whatever they want about the natural desires of human instincts.
Bravo,
That's
bravo. That's
yeah,
an excellent point.
yeah.
Heterophobia.
And I know this. I had a beautiful girlfriend. I mean, she was so very feminine, and she was just gorgeous. I mean, she was so pretty, and she would be around homosexual men, and she said, I feel like I'm not feminine enough when I'm around them, because what they do is because they're insecure, because they're not women, they overact, right? They exaggerate it. Everything is about sex. Now you wouldn't let your kids hang out with somebody who all they ever talked about was sex. Like, it just wouldn't be appropriate. You shouldn't be talking to my kindergartner about pedophilia as a sexual preference. Scumbags. What's wrong with these people? How on earth is this even possible? And that's where, and I'm not one to impose morality on people. I don't believe in it. I don't think that there's one set of morality that makes everything Like, it's only this. But everybody has a conscience. And you know, if you're imposing your will on a child who doesn't even know what you're doing, that is not a sexual preference. That is an anomaly, and that is a perversion of what it means to be human. That's what that means. Because naturally, we all have a natural desire to love and protect our children. So much so that you'll protect somebody else's child because you know how sacred that life is. And if you don't have that, you are not human. You are not. Sorry.
Yep. Indeed.
Indeed.
Uh,
So, but
I,
I think these things have to be talked about. I think we
I,
have to. Yeah.
yeah, I was just flashing back, to a time where I'm in high school, right? And my a very good friend of mine, who's um, born in Mexico, moved to America with his family. I don't know legal status or not. Didn't matter. But he was in high school with me. Him a good friend of mine, and but he was. I saw him become very effeminate, like overly
Yeah.
effeminate. As and I just said to, okay, well, all right, whatever you're going to do, that's fine. You go do what you're going to do. But I still hung out. We're friends, and no problem. I remember we were going over. I tutored a lot of people in math back then, physics and other things. So I'd end up, spending a lot of time at his house, and his family was not happy with his changes and things of that nature. But for the um, there was some abuse from his father about that, and that his mother was very nurturing. But I ran into him I don't know, 15 years later, something like that, just randomly. I didn't recognize him at all, right?
Mm.
But he no longer acted effeminate, right? But he was still gay. But he actually was more butch, you might say at this time, very. I guess it wasn't he wasn't biker, but he was more homey, homeboy type at that time. But we had to caught up with things. It was good to see him and everything. But he never. I just to notice that transition that I saw him go through, right, where he became so effeminate,
Yeah.
and then so many years later he was not that. I mean, in any way, but still gay.
Right. Because
And I still wasn't interested.
but at least he was a guy, right? Well,
Yeah.
it's funny. I've talked to a lot of people about this in the gay community, right? And I and one of the things is it's like, well, first of all, if you're attracted to men, wouldn't it make sense that you'd want them to be have the natural characteristics that make a man a man? It's not just the genitalia, right, that make a man, right? There's a way that a man carries himself, a man, and vice versa, right? A woman. Now, if you're really into and attracted to naturally women, wouldn't it make sense that the other woman would have the attributes of a woman? But I would venture a guess that about, I would say 70% of both communities are overly effeminate, exaggerated versions of men who are trying to understand what it means to express themselves as a homosexual. And I think in some cases that it's still natural, but it's just they're expressing themselves that way. And then I think in the uh, lesbian community that oftentimes it's women are looking for safety and security that no man in their life has provided. So they don't associate those attributes with a man. And then, they find a woman who does, and they end up becoming. I was in my friend's lesbian wedding. I was in her wedding, and I know her, and she was a beautiful girl. And I remember her telling me, she goes, she's going on a date right now. Her father had a secret other family, right? So she never trusted men, and she was like one of my best friends. We were teachers together, and I never hit on her because I was married, right? And we were very good friends. So I was the first man she had trusted her whole life, right? And we would talk about these things all the time. She'd go on dates, and she never felt safe, so she could never be herself. So she just decided one day that she was going to be a lesbian. She goes, you know what? She said, I'm going to go on this date. If it doesn't work out, she goes, I think I'm going to like girls. She's kind of made up her mind one day, right? And I go, okay. Like, that's, see, I thought she was kidding. But then lo and behold, they didn't work out. And we were, talking about how she was going to break into the community. And I still thought it was a joke, right? So like they sought out the softball coach, who coincidentally was a lesbian. And she was like typical kind of guyish type lesbian. Went out on one date. Next thing, like within a year, they were married, and they're still married and have a beautiful child. And now after that, I remember we're sitting around with our art students, and she tells all the students, she goes, "Me and Mr. Rao would have got married, but he was married when I met him, so she became a lesbian." I mean, she told me, she told him right there. That's what happened. Now, her situation isn't any more extreme than any other situation I've seen. So at very least, I know that does happen on some occasion, right? Not that I could possibly claim to be the expert in those type of things, but that reality does exist. So it's not, and there has to be a place where, we're allowed to talk about that, because it's definitely one of the things. Now, if you're allowed to talk about, sexual orientation and all these things, and you're not allowed to discuss it, right? And we're not allowed to mention anything. That's bullshit. Excuse me. I'm sorry. That is not fair. You cannot put that on people. I will talk about whatever I want to talk about.
Right. Yeah, and it should be part of the topic. And we talk about choice, right? And is part of this, right? So, and it's more about choice than being born that way. And I know, well, you're not in our community, so you're not allowed to say that attitude. And I said, well, I'm just looking from my experience. As I said, I saw my friend choose to be more effeminate, and then sometimes at some point he decided to change, so he was not effeminate about this. So, and then I saw many others that had the choice and they chose to do something. And I think that's a society creating a situation of forcing a choice, especially when you go down into where you're trying to force children to choose, and at an age where they shouldn't even be thinking about it.
Yes.
Right.
That's right.
Is social engineering to stop reproduction.
That is exactly what it is. That's why the lesbian gay community has exploded in numbers, right? It's not because they were all secretly in the closet. That's not true. There are people that are naturally born gay, and I am by no means like, I understand like that happens, and I'm not for or against it. I'm just not going to promote it, be talking about the rights, and make it seem like it's all the same, because it's not. The same way that racism, you can't say that any one race is all just like this. Like, what? Everybody who's Islamic is not a freaking terrorist, okay? And everybody, like everyone who is Christian is not like over the top, like closed off. There's a lot of Christians that are closed off to any other idea, but they're not all like that. And anytime we start making these assessments and say they're all this, that is what any kind of racism or true bias really looks like. Now, you can make assessments about culture and give an honest assessment that people will criticize, because you're not allowed to say that, right? Like, if you're a white guy, you can never talk about racism, which I find to be absolutely ridiculous. I was a minister for 20 years in an 99%, black organization. So I went all over the country preaching, and I constantly was subjected to all types of different biases and conclusions because I was white. So I do understand that does happen, right? But here's what I found. I mean, this is just in my experience. Now, this is my experience. My two best friends are both black, and they're both ministers. And I have no problem talking about this as a subject. And I think we have to talk about these things to just be honest. So, for example, you have, like in the South, for example. Now, I grew up in New York, upstate. My whole town was white. There was one black kid in the whole town, and he was the coolest guy, and everybody loved him, right? Because it wasn't a big deal. Down south,
you still have this essence of this kind of slave mentality. Now, because of that, what would happen is when slavery was around, and the slave owner would come in and say, how's your son doing? The mother would say, oh, he's no good. His back is weak, because she wanted to keep the family together. So she would say that about her child to keep the family united, right? So that mentality perpetuated, right? It's just one, version of slave mentality, by the way. So that perpetuated over time. And you have, because real slave mentality, by the way, is when we're divided. That's what real slave mentality is. It has nothing to do with anybody's race. It has to do with being divided in your mind against other people, thinking they're the problem. That's what real slave thinking. Somebody on the ground where you are is the one suppressing you and blaming them for something that's not. That divisive mentality. Now, so you'd have that happen, right? And then over time, there's just certain things you would do, right? Like the kids couldn't act. You couldn't have the kids act up because you didn't want to make the slave owner mad, right? So the kids would get beat, so they would know, right? They'd get spanked or whatever, but sometimes pretty aggressively, and it was normal. Now down south, that's still normal, right? It's still normal to talk that way about your kids at times. It's still normal to beat the kids, right? As a way of punishment. Now I'm not judging that. That's a reality, though. I'm not saying that's right or wrong. I'm just saying it is what it is. Now that's common in Black culture in the South and probably other places too. Now, is it everywhere? No, but it is common. Now, in white culture in upstate New York in the North, is that common? No, my father never laid a hand on me my whole life. I never laid a hand on my child. And, I don't need to, because if I raise my voice to my children, that's all it ever takes. I watched my son cry one time just because I told him no in such a stern voice. I mean, so he didn't get hurt, but he was I couldn't even imagine hitting him. I'm like, he's just a baby. I mean, he was like maybe 6 at that time. But it's common, in that culture. So is that racist because I say that's common? No. I am aware that that's normal. Even stereotypes, there's an element that stems from something that's true. To assume that's what all that a culture is, that's when you're racist. When you think that's all they have to offer, or that's all even the idea, they are just as human as you and I are human. All of us are human. Now, if we show that we're something different, it still doesn't mean that, oh, see, I told you that's how whatever race is. All that means is, oh, you were raised that way. You were raised that way. That's okay. And that's the reality. And that's the conversation we need to have, is stop pretending like we all have to have the exact same values and there's only one right and wrong, because there's not. I know amazing people that got beat when they were kids. And it's totally normal to them. They're not mad at their parents. They don't hate them. They have a great relationship with them. They're wonderful human beings. So what can I say? You shouldn't beat your kid. It's bad. Well, I mean, I don't, because for me it's bad, because my conscience tells me not to do it. But I can't dictate that to somebody else. And that's what all this stuff is doing when you start to dictate every aspect of morality. Now, some things, though, are just wrong. Like Sharia law is a freaking train wreck. Women can't show their face. They're allowed to be treated as slaves. They're never allowed to have a voice. They can be killed if they disobey their husband. The laws associated with Sharia law are violent and brutal, and they're designed to suppress that feminine energy, because they don't want the power of that divine feminine to be what leads and sets up this world and this new age we're going into. So they've done all they can to create this perverted, super masculine alpha male, and then so your warmongering, control freak was the guy for the longest time. Women were supposed to be subjective and humble and act like slaves. That's what they wanted. But then they decided to go to a peaceful society. So in a peaceful society, they realized, what's going to cause us a problem? The alpha male. Because if any of these guys start acting like the alpha male, then we're going to have a problem, because they're going to rise up, right? Now, so what do? So then they start in like the early 80s, start portraying men in every sitcom as just bumbling idiots who can't do anything, can't make a decision. They can't balance their checkbook. They got to ask them to sneak around to smoke a cigar in the garage, and and their wives are holding it down, right? They're managing the kids. They got full-time jobs. They're giving the orders. They got everything together. They're trying to flip the script and make people think this is normal. This is all men are, and this is all women are. Yeah. And that's ridiculous. And all of that, I reject all of it. I reject all of those stereotypes, all of them. People are different. They're raised differently. but essentially everybody is pretty much the same. But everybody has different experiences, and this affects who we are. Why can't that just be what it is instead of trying to label one thing and then another? And why do we have to celebrate something? I'm not celebrating, homophobia day or whatever, or anti-homophobia day. It's like, just have a real conversation and stop trying to put a label on everything.
Heterophobia day.
What's that?
We have to start the heterophobia day.
Right.
Just as a counter, right?
Right.
It would be good as a way to point out that there should not be this promotion of these type of things. This difference, right? Supporting the differences, right? We need to focus on where we're the same. Again, it's another way of dividing us.
Yes, that's true. That's very true. And that's all they want to. Now, what is slave mentality? That's what it is. A divided mind. We're split, constantly divided against each other. We blame people because of basic assumptions, and we come up with judgments and assessments and ideas about who they are because they're wearing a hooded sweatshirt or because they're wearing a suit. And you know what? Many a criminal that wore a suit, and there's many a philanthropist who wore a hooded sweatshirt. But these judgments we have, they're small-minded, they're ignorant, and they don't make humanity better. So we have to break those things up. We just have to have a real conversation about what they are. Like Kamala Harris coming out, and every time she says something, she says, "When I'm president," I'm like, "Are you kidding? I mean, are you really do you really think you're going to be president?" Like, we are living in the apocalypse if Kamala Harris is president. I mean, it is the end of the world. And everybody, I mean, I wouldn't even know what I'd do. It's just not possible. So I collapse that reality. There's no place in my world to continue to allow people who have no vision, no real charge, nothing exceptional about them. There's no way they could lead us when all the government, you see them and you realize there's nothing that they can do that you can't do better. There's no way that they should be in those positions. There's just no way. So, and they never think about the people. Like you hardly even hear them mention people in any of this. Why are they going after President Trump to impeach him? What is it? They never define why. And now the reason is he has the nerve to reject subpoenas. These jokers had that man investigated for 2.5 years. They committed crimes, and they have the nerve to say he's he's violating the Constitution, which because he won't give up information that constitutionally he doesn't have to. Like, do they even read the Constitution?
Yeah. I was just looking up heterophobia. see if it's already a thing. There is some thought out there. So I don't know if you made it up on the spot, but it is talked about. So it's something that it is in the zeitgeist at the moment.
Yeah. No, I mean,
I'm all for people expressing what they want and not want, but it's the imposition upon the rest of society to the point where they want to use the force of law to change things. And I can see that people are born a certain way to a certain extent, but it's nowhere near where they present it as the 100% of everyone in this way that is this way. 100% are born that way. No, it is such the minority that are born. The rest of it is a learned behavior. And there is scientific evidence of this, but that evidence is suppressed, right? So there is a mechanism within the brain that allows for adaptation, for a lot of reasons, and then that becomes the habitual thing that happens and that you accept and then move towards and create and that's the reality you end up creating for yourself.
Yep. It's amazing. I call it convenient science, right?
Convenient science.
You
Yes.
break out the science that backs your story, right? And then you put it one newspaper.
Hello? Hello? Oh, you got muted. You might have got a call coming in. And we are approaching the third hour. We try to definitely have a hard break at the third hour. So we will see if Tank comes back in a little bit. We can finish up on the topic, or we can just move on if it takes too long. But just to say that just as evidence of being born that way, people are actually born with both sets of genitalia. They will have both types of hormones fighting in their body. It does happen. It's not common. It's not 1 out of 100. It's not 1 out of 1,000. It's not 1 out of 1,000,000. I don't know if it's 1 out of 100 million. Probably something to look up, but it does occur. So when that happens, yes, those people have a choice to make. Choose one or the other and surgically move towards one, which often is what happens when it does occur. They choose one and they move towards that gender. Or they don't. Decide not they're going to be the way they are. So they do have a choice to make. So are certain people born with one hormone imbalance that is moving them towards a direction? Yes, but again, it's more rare, right? And as Tui said, that those people have a gift of both energies. So that I can understand that. But it's otherwise it is a choice that is pushed upon society by the cabal to actually create a situation of depopulation and probably a source of amusement for them. So again, I don't fault anyone for the choices that they decide to go down and go whatever lifestyle they want. That's fine, as long as it's not going to be forced upon my children in school, right? For them to make a choice when they're 5 years old, which is what's happening. Which was never supposed to happen, right? With sex education, all it's supposed to be in, 12th grade, 11th grade, 10th, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3. When my kids were in school, it was down to the 5th grade. Now they're at kindergarten. So, this incrementalism is another tool that's used to force things in a direction. So, giving government this authority is the problem. All right, this is something that they shouldn't have the authority over. And decentralizing is probably the better way for us to take things than anything else. Well, anyway, I think that pretty much covers us to the topic. I think Tank is probably still on the call, or maybe he's talking and he doesn't know that he's been muted. But in any case, we're at the third hour. It's good enough so we can call it an end of the day. And I appreciate everyone for joining in. Again, this is something where we want you to participate by sharing the links, subscribing, giving thumbs up, positive comments, negative comments not needed. Don't like what's happening here, move on. But we appreciate everyone's effort. Please join me in Kringle Society, and on that Kringle, you'll get some coin put into your wallet if you participate. You do have to pay the 22 grains of gold fee. I'm sorry, 8 grains of gold fees, $22 roughly. There's a system where you can make money, or you can let the wallet grow, participate in the promotions. Or join also in the Where We Go One, We Go All.love website that I'm building up a community there for the information about the battles that are at hand here. And we appreciate you participating there. There's $1.11 for a you want to participate in the forums, it's $1.11 a month, or $8.80 a month, $8.88 a month if you're going to express an interest in more support for my efforts and what's going on here. So I appreciate that. And we're getting more freebies. But anyway, this site is just forming, and getting a handle on all of this editing and things that I'm working on. So I've been including the Speak project videos on the site to get a but takes some time to get that together. So all working it into a system where we can keep pumping this out. If you want to do your own channel, please contact me. I'll help you out with that. Get your conversation going. This is how we expand out, right? We have the same message. We expand out. Keep it going. So go ahead and participate on that basis. And with that, and then I will see you tomorrow, and Tank will, and we'll see if we have any news for when the project funding is here. Have a good one.